Good evening. My name is Robert Jago, and I am a writer at The Walrus. Notice, if you look at your programs, it says writer and not speaker. So, lower expectations. So I write on First Nations issues for them. I'm a citizen of the Kwantlen First Nation, part of the Stolo people, who are a Salish people on the west coast, in a region we call Soltameku, otherwise known as the Lower Mainland. I was born and raised off reserve in the city of Richmond, a suburb of Vancouver. My family moved to the Katzie First Nation, another Stolo reserve, to the east of the city when I was a teenager after my cousin James went missing. Our family was quite involved with the search for him. Because of that, people didn't go to work, bills went unpaid, and the reserve is where we ended up. The situation there wasn't the best, and so after a time, I returned to the city when I was 18. Without plans, without money, I ended up homeless very quickly after moving to the city. And in a practical sense, what that means is I spent some time on good days on the couches and floors of relatives, and on bad days in doorways on the downtown east side. As a consequence of that experience and not being able to access resources and not being able to navigate the system to get support, I ended up losing about 60 pounds in a few months and was constantly sick. It was one of those days that I was sick. It was a bad day, and I couldn't find a place to stay, so I was wandering down Hastings Street, and I ended up doubling over and throwing up on the street. Now, on the downtown east side, if you don't know it, it's a very, very busy place. It's very crowded, there's lots of traffic and lots of people on the street, but for the most part, if you're one of those people, like I was, you are completely invisible. But on this day, I wasn't invisible. A Native woman saw me. In my memory, she looked like Tina Keeper. And she came over, and she picked me up, she cleaned me up, she made sure I was okay, she called me a papoose. And then she went on into a dive bar. And of every memory, that one sticks with me the most because of what it meant. It was the first time that I was down there where someone saw me, where someone recognized me as an individual. And it helped me remember what it was like to be a person. Because the experience for many Native people in the inner cities of our city, of our major places, is that you're not seen, is that you're completely invisible, and that you fall through the cracks very easily. Native people in the inner cities are often described in stereotypes as drunk or dangerous, as beggars, or just generally as a problem. But seldom, at least as individuals, are we seen. And not being seen means that we miss out on help. It means we miss out on care, and it means we miss out on resources. This fact is why a host of grassroots Native organizations, like the Bear Clan in Winnipeg, in Thunder Bay and Regina, the Wolf Clan in Montreal, and the Crazy Indians throughout the West. These are community service organizations started by regular Native people, not by chiefs, not by activists, but by regular, hardworking, tax-paying Native residents of the city who take their time to go out and help and find the weakest of our people, the ones who fall through the cracks. Groups like this exist because we're not afraid of each other. We can see each other without that built-in fear or defensiveness. These people are there bringing food, getting them help, keeping them out of danger, noticing when they're gone. When we look at the crisis in Thunder Bay or the loss of Native girls and women in Winnipeg, when we look at the day-to-day racism the Native people see in our cities, it's because we're both not seen and not seen as individuals. When you're kicked out of Starbucks, it's not necessarily for what you've done to yourself, but it's for what someone's perception of you is. It's someone's perception of what they think people like you have done in the past. And this is what it is for us. I know on the face of it, it seems trite. And I know people are doing things, I know people out there creating awareness, but from non-Native-led organizations, it's the wrong kind of awareness. To be seen, you need to be a person and not a problem. And it's hard to think of us as anything but problems when even now in the reconciliation era, 100% of the outreach and the work done to bring us together presents us that way. Everything from these people is about the litany. The residential schools and the 60s scoop, missing and murdered Indigenous women, and on and on and on. They're important, but focusing solely on them misses the 99.9% of the rest of our lives. Back in October, I was in Thunder Bay, and while there, I met the local diversity committee, the government-funded diversity committee. 2 white women, both older, who told me about their work to make a scene, to bridge the gap, to solve the problem of racism in Thunder Bay. They talked about their upcoming seminar on white privilege. They boasted that one of them had seen a Native kid being yelled at on the street and berated a white shopkeeper about it. And good. These are good things. I mean, I suppose you want to do that, but it's too much of it. It can't just be that. Knowing that racism exists, knowing that abuse exists, explains why so many of our kids need help. It explains why so many are preyed upon. It explains why so many turn to drugs or alcoholism or gangs. But knowing that doesn't make you want to give someone a job. Knowing that doesn't make you want to rent your place to them. Present us this way, and this is how we're all seen, the other 99% of us. And again, this is not Native people doing this. This is non-Natives squandering our political capital, berating other white people about their privilege, and ham-handedly reinforcing stereotypes that hold us back. White people yelling at other white people doesn't help Indians. These people in Thunder Bay made me think of those Ontario teachers who thought it was a brilliant idea to take down the name of Sir John A. Macdonald for everywhere. And it's not a bad idea, but it's a bad use of our political capital. Political capital, public goodwill, is a finite resource, and rather than move things forward, this triviality exposes to abuse and ridicule. White privilege as a concept is valid. Macdonald was bad. You won't find an Indian that doesn't say that. Macdonald was not, we're not keen on him. But it doesn't move the ball forward when it comes to inclusion and acceptance. Remember, it's about outcomes. It's about ensuring that there's someone who can see you and pick you up when you need it. I met the anti-racism groups. I met the people at City Hall. I met the reps for MPs, and on and on and on. I met all of these people, all of these white Canadians, and from them was a barrage of negativity, creating events for masochists, but not for regular people, and certainly not for families. It's all so frustrating. None of it is about us. It's about them and their guilt and self-flagellation. I get so many messages and emails from this type of white people apologizing to me vicariously for the sins of the white man. It is gross to be included in that. It is to be unwillingly roped in to their weird shame fetish. Meanwhile, the real work in places like Thunder Bay was done across town at the Blue Sky Center, where Natives like that woman I met on Hastings Street 2 decades before work every day. In that community center, they don't have a white privilege night, but they do have a traditional painting night. They do have a traditional food night. They do have language lessons. They do have places where we bring people together, where we include non-Natives by sharing our cultures. I asked the people from the diversity committee what they thought of these events. They said they knew about some of them, but were afraid to go. They didn't feel welcome. You hear this so much. I talked recently to a Canadian-based writer for Slate, the wokest of the counterintuitive woke. He was all over the masochism and the finger-pointing and guilt, but couldn't imagine a Native event that was fun. Think about the breakthrough in gay rights. Think about how the Chinese community is seen. Think about how the South Asian community is seen. Have you ever met someone that didn't want to go to a Chinese event because of their safety? When we think about the Chinese community, do we think first of the head tax? When we think of the Indians, do we think first of the Komagata Maru? No and no. We think of cultures because that is our interaction with them, and cultures by their nature are open. The interaction with us isn't culture, it's problem solving and guilt mongering, and it's ultimately unproductive. We Natives, in our own efforts, lead with culture and openness. But these efforts are undermined by non-Native organizations, self-described allies, that drown us out with their negativity. Alternatively, they're shut down by our own self-identified Native academics, standing at the gates of our culture like guard dogs, growling and barking and scaring everybody away. If we want to improve things, we need to work around these people, and we need to make people want to spend time with us, which is how I end up back at Richmond. Richmond has, Richmond has 200,000 people, 23% of whom are white. Sometime in the next few months, Metro Vancouver as a whole will join Richmond in having a non-white majority. At that time, the era of Vancouver's white majority will finally be over after 130 years. Greater Toronto will follow shortly after. Ottawa, Montreal, Calgary, Edmonton, maybe in the decades to come. These people aren't natives, but many are immigrants, and polling shows that immigrants aren't afraid of us. A generation later, though, they are. They become immersed in the culture, they learn the narratives, and they're taught to fear us. As for those who do fear us, the former white majority in these cities, the Boushie and the Fontaine verdicts and the reaction to these have shown that we are a lot further behind than anyone thought. But a culture-first approach can get us around them. It takes advantage of the demographic opportunity we have in our cities. Leading with culture, they won't be taught to fear us, they will become a part of our lives. In 2018, these are the majority of people that walk past our kids on the street. These are the ones doing the hiring, these are the ones renting out the apartments. They're receptive, we need them, and we have so much in common. In reality, reconciliation is surely dead. Maybe it doesn't even apply in cities. Maybe it never applied in cities because on the ground there, so few people belong to that settler class. But in its place, we have the more honest work of relationship building and reciprocity and giving and sharing, a relationship that we control. These values are the heart of our cultures on the West Coast and are at the heart of many of the new immigrant cultures. Culture First doesn't ignore the problems of racism and dispossession. Those are real and those must be addressed. But it is a parallel path, separate from the negativity, separate from white guilt and shame, so that these places that we share, we can build something together on our terms. A common home where we can be together and look out for each other. It doesn't come from the culture, it doesn't come from the government or the culture warrior academics, it's from the ground up. It's from regular, hardworking, tax-paying Native citizens of the city. These places that we're retaking and reestablishing our civil life in, we're doing it free from Indian-Act governments. We're pushing past misdirection of our allies. We're doing it on our own with the Wolf Clan, with the Bear Clan, with the Crazy Indians. We are leading without guilt. We are leading with culture, with simple acts of humanity, like that woman on that night on Hastings Street. Thank you.